Hello, everybody. I'm Ted Huntington, here again with another women's rights podcast, a fabulous interview for your viewing pleasure. We are going to be talking with Debra Leigh Scott. I'm going to start out with a quote from Debra Leigh Scott's email signature. The greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. That's from Michelangelo, and it's an apt saying for my special guest, Debra Leigh Scott, who describes herself as an artivist and edupreneur, a professional writer, playwright, singer, maybe we'll get her to sing something for us, filmmaker, educator, dramaturg, I don't even know what half of these things are, editor, arts administrator, public speaker, activist, and I don't know, Santa Claus too. Often all at the same time. Debra has offered the critically acclaimed collection of short stories, Other Likely Stories, Tales of Life in the Tumultuous 1960s. She's currently developing a new anthology called Crossing the Line, as well as several novels and a nonfiction project. Her first documentary film, Junked, the trashing of higher ed in America, about the corporate colonization of America's universities, is heading into post-production. Welcome the incredibly busy Debra Leigh Scott.
Hi, Ted. How are you? Hello, everybody. I don't do all of these things all at the same time.
I don't know how you do two of them.
Well,
So let's start out with, what is an artivist and an edupreneur?
An artivist is somebody who uses creativity in their activism. And I don't think that writing fiction should be blatantly political, but I think that there are ways that we can use our art to bring out certain aspects of the human condition. And that's one of the things that I find happening, not even intentionally, but I find it kind of bubbling through the work that I do. And usually I kind of discover what the social issues are once I've already done something of a rough draft. And I realize that there are certain things in it that I might want to tease out a little bit more. Edupreneur is, well, the way that I'm thinking of it these days is that there are many of us, and this sort of links to the documentary, many of us who trained to teach at the university level, who spent their careers teaching on adjunct contracts. And a good number of us lived in poverty on those contracts as we were teaching. And of that large number of people, a good portion of them have left to try to do other things with their zeal to be educators and mentors. And we're all in various stages of trying to figure out what that means. For me, I left the university only, I guess it's about 2.5 years ago now. And I'm still trying to figure out how to share all the curriculum that I've decided, that I've designed, all of the things that I wanted to teach in classrooms that I never got to teach. Because when you teach on adjunct contracts, you're basically teaching to administrative designed syllabus programs. And that means that you can spend most of your life not really teaching the things that you spent close to 10 years of graduate work to train to teach. So what I'm hoping as an entrepreneurial response to this kind of disappointment is that I can figure out ways to get that information out and get those passions out, share them with other people.
Wow, that seems like quite a lofty goal.
It is, but it's sort of a heartbreak when, I mean, for me, the years of graduate work were focused on, well, you know how graduate work gets more and more and more narrow. Eventually, it was 16th century mysticism and the Elizabethan era. And I was always fascinated with Renaissance studies and with Renaissance literature and art. And in all of the years of teaching, and it was close to 25 years of teaching, I never got to teach in any of those areas. So I would try to sneak it in once in a while with some of the other things that I was doing. But I mean, that's an incredible waste. So I am not dead yet. So I feel like I have a little bit of time to try to figure out how to actually use that training in a way to, share all of the stuff that I was passionate about and never really got to share before.
Well, I'm already thinking about some follow-up interviews that we might be able to have. Where well, for this one, let's focus on your books because this is about female
Right.
authors. So let's start by telling us about your writing career and how that came about, and talk a little bit about your books.
Okay. Um, the book that is out in the world at this point is, as you said, the collection of short stories, The Other Likely Stories. And that was a collection that took a really long time. I'm a very slow writer, and it took me a good number of years to get that collection together, to get a sufficient number of them published in various journals and things like that. And the focus of that collection, it's an interrelated collection of stories. There are three characters, two sisters, military brats living at Fort Bragg, and their cousin, who is in and out of trouble, in and out of the stories. The time period of that collection is 1955 to 1975, and that seems to be the 20-year period that fascinates me, because in addition to this collection of stories, which kind of tells a coming of age arc for each one of these characters, I'm back working on a novel right now that starts in 1974, 75. And it's Rachel, the oldest of the two sisters, again. And we're exploring some of her blocked memories from all the way back in 1955. So I think because I was a 60s baby and I lived through all of that, it's been my desire, I guess, to sort of explore that time period in ways that helps me to understand what on earth was going on back then. And then my other projects, at this point, I have a lot of things in the works right now. Another collection of short stories, as you said, Crossing the Line. And that is sort of an exploration of people who all go just a little bit too far in the things that they do. And you know how in life, when you take that one step beyond where you really should have gone with behavior or something you've said, or something you've risked,
Many
and
times.
suddenly you can't take it back and everything changes. Each one of these characters in the second collection has in some way or another crossed that line, and then the idea is what happens to them after that. So I don't know. I mean, do you want me to keep talking about these other projects, or do you have, I assume you have some other questions. I don't want to just keep blabbing on here.
Well, no. So how did you catch the writing bug? How did you decide? Was it during the course of your teaching that you said you've had these ideas that kind of grew as a seed, and you said, okay, when I stop teaching, I'm going to become an author and put these into words? How did that happen?
I think I was born being a writer. From the time I was really little, I used to memorize poems and stories, and I started making up stories when I was in elementary school. And I don't think there was ever a time, I can't really remember a time when I wasn't fascinated by stories. And I think I started really early on to fashion my own. So yeah, I mean, even though I'm a slow writer, I've been a writer my whole life. Lord help me being this slow. If I started later, I'd be in big trouble.
So what writers influence you?
Uh, that's such a hard question, Ted. Um, I love Southern writers. Here in the United States, my favorite writers are the ones, um, I'd say somebody like Lewis Norden, the late Lewis Norden, or the late Barry Hannah, are two that I go back to a lot. Somebody like Flannery O'Connor. But I think if I'd have to settle on one writer that I go back to all the time, that would be Dickens. I love Charles Dickens. And I find myself going back to his work a whole bunch. So, I think it's largely because of his characters. I love the way that he understands characters. He's got a powerful psychological sort of focus on who these individuals are.
So how does that get incorporated into what you're writing? So do you go back and go, oh, I want to open up Oliver Twist and see how he developed that character and really kind of incorporate that into my book? Or how does that process work for you?
I don't think there's a direct connection in that way. I think it's just that I'm fascinated by how closely he looks at individual psychology. And in fact, I think everything that I write is character driven. So for me, when I go back to his material, it's just to see how deeply he can take the reader into a character and how deftly he does that. I don't know that I've ever really learned how to use any of his methods. I wish I could, but it's more just dipping into that well to kind of nourish myself and remind myself that what I really want to do is, hold that focus.
Now, so how do you juggle all of these projects?
Well, I don't juggle all of them. I think that there's kind of a larger cycle. So Other Likely Stories was published about 10 years ago now. And from then until now, I'd say for about 5 years or so, I wasn't writing fiction. I was working primarily in theater. And over those years, I think I wrote 5 or 6 plays. And then during that same time, I was launching Hidden Rivers Publishing enterprise. I launched Hidden River Arts now like 25 years ago, but 10 years ago, I launched a small press. So I was also at the very beginning of trying to figure out how to make that happen. And that was also right around the time that I started working with Chris Labrie, who is my co-producer and partner in the documentary. I started working on a fiction again probably about 3 years ago. And there were a whole bunch of ideas that just started popping that seemed to take the form of fiction. So I went back to doing that. And now I've got, I guess, about 3/4 of a collection, and I've got a couple novels that are in various stages of being finished, but I'm not writing plays right now. So I think it's just, one form or another, but I don't know that I can really do it all at the same time and give it a decent amount of attention.
I've been seeing this a lot with authors in that they start to dabble in other areas in the writing world, whether it's publishing or screenwriting or editing and proofreading. They start getting, and a lot of it is just from networking and connecting with other people and saying, hey, I might be good at this, I might be good at that. So it's kind of good advice for other writers, female writers, male, really any writer. Don't necessarily pigeonhole yourself.
Right.
Would you agree?
I would agree. I think it's also really important to discover all of those aspects of your own creativity, because every one of them, they all inform each other. And there's something to be learned, I think, with each artistic discipline that you go into. I when I was very much younger, when I was, I guess, 16 or so, I thought that I was going to go to art school and work in visual art. And I haven't done that. But for a while, I was running an art gallery. and working with a lot of visual artists. And one of the things that I want to do now, since there are so many wonderful virtual platforms now, is to try to recreate virtually the gallery that I was running, and do profiles of visual artists, and bring that part back into my life again. It's just creativity just takes its own shape. And I think the best that we can do as artists is to follow whatever direction it seems to be moving in.
That's
And
phenomenal advice. Yeah.
yeah, you have to trust that inner guidance somehow, and be willing to, what's the phrase, write a really shitty first draft of whatever it is. I mean, you have to be willing to have something stink.
The first
and
draft is crap, right?
Yeah.
So any parting words of wisdom? I know we're already kind of coming to the end here. We could talk for a lot longer. Yeah.
No, I don't. I think if we're talking to specifically women artists, what I would say is don't give up, and to trust yourself. Because what I've learned with the trajectory of the female creative is that often in our earlier adulthood, we're really busy raising children, or establishing a working career, or being involved in our relationships, and we're not having enough time to really devote to our own creative life. And I established an award called the Eladia Award for women writers age 40 and older, because I saw that there were an awful lot of women that weren't able to devote time to their creative life until they were older, and their kids were a little bit older, and their responsibilities were a little bit more balanced. And by then, the publishing world wasn't interested in what they had to say. So if I'm talking to women primarily, I want to say, keep working to discover your own voice, and don't let anybody else be the gatekeeper to what you want to do with your work. Don't wait for anybody else's permission. I think I waited too many years, for somebody else to give me permission to do things. And when I finally started just doing things myself, it made all the difference in the world.
That's fabulous. So I'm going to post links to your work underneath this video. I also encourage all the viewers to support women's rights publishing and author services. And I want to thank Debra Leigh Scott. Again, we just barely scratched the surface of all the fabulous things that you're working on. So thank you, Debra.
Thank you so much, Ted. This was really fun.
Pleasure.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.